So we are going to take a look at how to find the characteristics of trig functions. The easiest way is to think about a general formula that we can break down and put our different values into to see what it looks like. So I'm going to leave this over here on the left as our kind of general information, but let's go through it piece by piece so we can explore what each of these components are. So if we're looking, we have our y value, and then the first characteristic we come across is A, and A is for amplitude, and amplitude is going to be the height of our function. And so that's going to be, when you think about a function like this, let's say the amplitude is from the middle to the very top. It's going to give us the maximum height, or from the middle to the very bottom. So either of these are going to be amplitude. Next that we come across is going to be whether it's going to be sine or cosine, or maybe even a different function. So we're going to leave space here for the function. And we'll have to think about how we are deciding which one it is. For now, actually, I think let's put in sine just so we have something written in, but it might be a different one, so just keep that in mind. All right, next is going to be our value b, and b is used when you are thinking about the period. So the way that we're going to use this, we're going to say to find the period, is we're going to plug it into an equation. So let's say they give you a period. The way that you're going to find b is we're going to do 2 pi over b. Okay, and that is going to tell us how long it takes for one cycle to pass. All right, now as we keep going, x is the value of your angle, and then, or it's your coordinate if we're using a unit circle. And then we're going to add our next variable. Our next variable is c, and there we go. And so c is equal to our phase shift. And what that tells us is whether our function has shifted to the left or to the right from the x and y axis, from the x-axis particularly. So if it is shifted left, it's going to be a positive c, and if it has shifted right, it's going to be a negative c. Okay, now we are down to our very last value, and our last value is going to be d. And in the same way that c shifts our, we'll put that in there, shift left or right, d is going to be our shift in the vertical direction, in the y direction. So we're going to call it a vertical shift. And that means that our function has been moved up or down. Not taller or shorter, it doesn't change our amplitude, but if our entire function has moved in the upward direction or in the downward direction. And if it moves up, it's going to be positive d. If it moves down, it's going to be negative d. And that is what we're going to fill into our pieces. Now, the question is our function going to be cosine or sine? And so that is a good thing to think about, because one of the questions that you might be asked is to identify if it is sine or cosine. Okay, and the way that we are going to make that decision is by thinking about the sine graph and the cosine graph. So let's take a look at them individually and then kind of decide what we want to do with that. All right, so our sine graph starts at 0 if it hasn't been shifted, right? There hasn't been a phase shift. And then we are going to mark off on our graph. We're going to mark off pi, and we're going to mark off 2 pi. And we'll do the same thing down here, pi and 2 pi. Okay, so we're going to look at sine first. So sine is going to cross the axis at 0. It's also going to cross the axis at pi, and it's going to cross the axis one more time at 2 pi. And since we're doing a regular sine function, we haven't modified anything, we're going to make this 1, -1, and I'm going to mark it off. So it's going to go, these are the halfway points, so it's going to go up, and then down to pi, and then down and back up, and then it would keep going this way and keep going this way. That's for sine. For cosine, it's going to look slightly different. We are going to mark off 1 and -1 as well, and I'm going to delineate that space. And then what we're going to do is cosine is going to cross out the 1 for the y-axis. And then we're also going to mark off these half spots, and this is pi over 2, and this is 3 pi over 2. And so it's going to cross at pi over 2, going to hit the bottom of its amplitude at pi, and then come back up 3 pi over 2 and pi over 2. So it is going to kind of look like this. So mine is not the best picture, my apologies. So your goal is to use the information that you're given in order to decide whether you have a sine or cosine graph. So think about what details are provided to you at x equals 0, right? Think about if it's crossing the axis. Think about what information it might give you about 2 pi and whether or not it's shifted, right? So consider these components as you are solving it in order to figure out if you're doing sine or cosine.